We're in Amud HaTfilah, Ot Nun Zayin. It's from the Likutim Yikorim. Ein yochel yispalel keroi, im ein lo or makiv oisav v'kol tzedado v'sviv oisav, sheyargish oisav makiv. So he says a person cannot pray appropriately unless he feels a light that surrounds him from all sides. In the spiritual world, when we speak about receiving something, everything we can receive is a form of light. Light is a way to describe something that exists, but it doesn't exist in the physical world, it exists in the worlds of perception. So every form of perception is considered to be a light. So now, if our consciousness is shining on top of our head, that's like a light. Our head is like a light bulb, and the light is shining on it, and that's what we're experiencing. When we turn off the light, we're going to sleep, and then it's not shining. Unless there's a dream, and then there's like a shadow of the shining. And so this shining is a form of light, and so therefore every form of spiritual phenomenon that we can experience is going to be called light. And so with this metaphor of light and darkness is how we're going to describe life and death. We're going to describe love and hate. We're going to describe intelligence and ignorance. Everything is going to come back to the metaphor of light and dark. And this war between the light and the dark is constantly happening. Because this planet starts out dark. That's the nature of it. It starts out dark, and then slowly it grows into the light. And so the same for a human being. It starts out ignorant, starts out, and it can't feel compassion, can't feel the full array of emotions that are available within the human. And then that's something that develops. If the proper conditions are available, the child becomes a light. And so when we're in this world, if we are going to believe what is believed in this world, our prayer is going to become meaningless. We're not going to have any power in the spiritual realms. So if we want to have power, it means that we at least have to believe that what we are doing is meaningful and is going to have an impact. Otherwise, spiritually, we're not even doing it. And so to have that belief means to separate ourselves from everything that's around us, to separate ourselves from the way that the world thinks today, to separate ourselves from the spiritual interactions that are going on in the world, and for us to be now in some type of a bubble where reality can be real again, a bubble where we're not going to allow the lies that are believed outside of the bubble to interfere with what's going on inside the bubble. And so this bubble is a bubble of light. If our prayer is going to be meaningful, it's going to mean that we are now inside a light that's surrounding us and separating us from the way that the world thinks now what a human being is. That human being couldn't do anything of meaning, of purpose, of connecting to its divine center. Those things are not available to the human within our culture. And so to pray means to go outside of the culture, to stand with God, to stand with the source, to stand with the power that gave us the ability to define our experience. And so then we're surrounded by a light, we're surrounded by a certain type of a protection. Because the truth protects us, the truth gives us life. The truth gives us space, legitimacy, confidence. But the world, the way that humans are using it today, takes away from us all those things. So when we're surrounded by the light, we can regain our composure, and then we can pray, meaning that we can interact with the Creator the way that the Creator wants us to interact. Differently than we would interact with humans, because humans are causing us to interact with them in a certain way. That's not the way of the Creator. And so in the human world, when we're interacting, there's some type of a profit, there's some type of a gain that everybody's looking for. While in the spiritual world, the benefit is the interaction. Every interaction is done for the sake of the interaction itself. There's no other agenda, there's no profit to be had. Everything that happens is for its own sake. Every interaction is a demonstration that this is where there's interest, and there's interest for the purpose and for the sake of what's being interacted with. There's no other agenda. And this type of an interaction is fulfilling to the soul. The soul can receive because it interacted in a way that's meaningful to it. If it interacts in a way that's for some type of a profit, for some type of a future gain, then the soul is in exile by the imagination that's imagining that future benefit. And so every interaction of the soul is an interaction that's meaningful because of the sake of what's taking place, and that alone is the purpose. That alone is the end goal. It's not for the sake of anything else. If it's for the sake of anything else, then that something else becomes the one in charge. And everything else is working for it. So then there's some type of a serving, there's some type of work. And in the spiritual world, in the source, there's no work. Everything happens simultaneously. And that's because everything happens for its own sake. Everything that happens is the purpose of why it's happening. And so our world is very different. And therefore we have to create that bubble of light in order to go into the way that the world really is, because then our soul could really pray. Then it can express what's really on the heart, what's really meaningful to it. If it doesn't believe, it will not reveal what's meaningful. If it doesn't reveal what's meaningful, then the prayer can't really be answered, because the work of the prayer hasn't been done. So that's the first piece. The next one is Us Nun Ches. מתחילה כשרץ לספלל יהיה בירה, שהוא השעה לכנס לפוניו יזברך, ויאמר בליבוי, למי אני רוצה לדבק את עצמי, לבוירה ודבירה כל אוהלומס, ומהווה אסום, ומקיים אסום. ויזבוינן בגדילוסי ברממוסי, ואחר כך יוכל ליז באוהלומס עליונים. צבא סריבש. So he says, how do you enter? A person is in the mundane world, interacting with things that don't have deeper layers of meaning accessible, because they're man-made. The rules and their interactions that were designed by man. And this includes all forms of technology are man-made. Therefore, they lack the depth that the soul requires in order to sustain its own continued will. This is why when we have technology interfere with our daily schedule, the brain sometimes can get confused, and then our chemicals can get confused about how to interact with life. So we'll see this as all forms of addiction, but it means if it needs that phone to get its chemicals, then the phone is interfering with the chemical production. That's what that means. And so life has a certain depth. Life is alive. And this is what the soul is supposed to be looking at. The soul is supposed to be looking at the healthiest forms of life available. That's what's most healthy for the soul. The more it's looking at things that are not natural, artificial, or things that remind death and destruction, the soul starts to lose interest, and then we have less soul. And sometimes the soul can lose interest completely, and then there's no soul. And then we see that in the behavior, we see it in the interactions. And so a person is trying to leave the mundane and awaken the soul and return to reality. What's the doorway? How are we going to get it excited about reality? So the easiest thing to to get a strong response from the soul is if she doesn't feel safe. That's going to wake her up right there. And so, why would we want to not feel safe? Because based on how we think the world is, we aren't safe. So we're not thinking it through. If we would think it through, we would realize we're not safe. And then what do? Not to feel safe is not healthy. So then we'll realize we're really safe, but for a different reason. So now we think we're safe, for that reason we're not safe. Whatever is causing us to feel safe, no good. We shouldn't lean on that. But there is a real reason why we're safe. We have to get to that reason, then we're really safe. And so if we want to face reality, the first thing is to realize, what do I think is going on here? And if that's really what's going on, oh my God. Because then we'll realize, no, there's something bigger. Oh, something bigger? Welcome. First, leave your illusions of what you think is happening. That's for sure not happening. Let's establish that. That's the doorway into reality, closer to reality. First, step out from whatever you think it is. That for sure not. Then you're coming closer. Zeh ashar Hashem tzadikim yavohu bo. And so he says, who am I to approach the infinite? Have I really, really directed my attention so perfectly that I'll be able to somehow interact with the infinite? Do I feel even on my own level of what I can discern, have I come to a place where I myself am pleased with the way that I am? Before I'm looking to the infinite and say, are you pleased with the way that I am? And so this opens the door. It's not to make the person small. It's to make the person realize that they are part of something so big, so indescribable, that everything that they could possibly do to respect it doesn't even come close, doesn't even start, doesn't even begin what it deserves. We're looking for this realization. We'll push the soul around to get to this realization because it's so healthy for the soul. Awe-inspiring. That's what we're looking for. Something that can inspire awe. This is something that the soul needs. The soul needs to be in contact with something bigger than itself in order to feel safe. This is part of its design. This is why people cling to their religions, cling to their nationalities, cling to their sports teams. Anything to feel like they're part of something bigger. And they'll do anything. They'll give their life for it. This is a requirement. This is not an option. And so when the soul doesn't have that, life becomes meaningless. Life is not worth it. And then the sufferings are not justified. There's not enough fuel to overcome. But through the awe, we're attached to something bigger. For something bigger, the soul is willing to sacrifice. The soul is willing to suffer. The soul is willing to invest. Because there's something bigger that's justifying it, that's making it right. This is the nature of our world. This is the language that our soul understands at this point, and this is how the biology is wired. We can outgrow this place and be like the spiritual, where every interaction is for the sake of itself. That's a higher level. That's a different place. That requires different biology, different development. Well, there's a form of development where the soul is motivated by each interaction, and that's enough. There's nothing bigger that needs to justify it anymore. It's big enough. Life is big enough. Everything is big enough and meaningful enough that it's worth whatever it requires. But now we're not in that state. We can't create that yet. So now we're creating something that will eventually result in that. And that's what's going to give it meaning. And so now we're attached to something bigger, something that's not yet, something that we're working towards, something that's going to come. This is the nature of our development. This is our process. And so when we have the awe, we're attached to that something bigger. We see, oh, there is something that I'm working for that's bigger than everything that I've experienced. Because what I've experienced doesn't justify this. It doesn't justify the process. Oh, but there's something bigger. Okay, now the soul can open up. Now the heart can rejoice. Now things can come into perspective. And so we realize that we're in touch with something that created with speech all the world. Speech means effortless versus action, where the entire body is involved. The body is sitting and resting. The mouth is moving and creating worlds upon worlds. Now we're doing that. This is just a metaphor. What is it pointing to? The Creator creating worlds. Stars, planets, species, individual bodies. Expressing an internal essence that is invisible and ineffable, and bringing that out into some type of a form, into some type of an expression, just like we're doing now. We're expressing an essence that's already been defined by Him, by His speech, by His combination of forces that create us. His speech is an expression of His essence. Our speech is an expression of our essence. With the speech, I'm defining myself more than through my arms and my legs. With my arms and my legs, I'm like everybody else. With my speech, I'm defining what's unique about me. And so He creates these worlds, all the worlds, with His speech. And now I'm going to turn towards that force with my speech. And I'm going to say, hey, hang on there. I got something to say too. So do we realize the nature of what's taking place? That's awe-inspiring. And it's not just that He created the worlds, it's that the worlds have nothing to lean on or nowhere to stand. So He's giving them continuance. Every moment He's recommitting all the resources that it requires to continue this project. It's a decision He makes only in that moment. And He makes it in that moment because in that moment He wants it so. That's the beginning and that's the end of that process. It doesn't need any profit for it. It doesn't need any other justification. It's not how He operates. And so He gives it being every moment. We can receive that being unconsciously, like we do all the time. Or we can turn towards the one who is giving us being. Hey, hello. I can't see you, but I know you're there. I've been getting from you something for quite a while. The deliveries have been arriving. You've been sending quite consistently. Haven't forgotten so far, not even once. And so when that becomes conscious, then suddenly you realize how close are you to all the action. All this greatness that you see in the external world that's awe-inspiring, and the internal world, you're right there next to the force that creates it all. You're receiving from him, but you're receiving from him directly. You're not only receiving from him directly, you're also receiving from him the capacity to realize that he is giving you. This makes it different than all the other creatures. This is what makes us special. And so through this realization, through the awe, then he's already in the higher worlds. He's already surrounded by a light that's protecting him from the illusions of the lower worlds, where everything and everyone is against you, and you're trying to protect yourself. In the higher worlds, if something is created, it's because the Creator is in love with it. Who is going to offend it? Who's going to say a bad word? Who's going to have a bad thought about something the Creator is in love with? Who's going to be the fool? Nun tes. Again from Likutim Yikarim. יש מי שמספל בעצפס מחמס מרשכויר הגברת עליו וסויבר שמספל בעיר גדולה. It says prayer can be tricky because in the spiritual worlds we're using the same attributes like we're using in the physical world. And so someone might be using the attributes from the physical world and think he's doing it from the spiritual world, and vice versa. It's not always so clear to the soul where it's standing and how it's using its force. For example, so someone might be very upset in the physical world because things are not going its way. And then he sees that in his prayer, his words are more developed and he's saying them with more confidence and he's expressing himself. But to him, that might seem like, oh, I'm spiritually in tune. No, this is something from the physical world that's pushing. It's not really the spirit over here that's so lively. So we can't always know where things are coming from. We need to be more clear with ourselves where our attributes are gaining their life force. What are we reacting to? In order to direct ourselves properly. So if someone has Marash Chayra, someone is feeling bitter, so we have to define that bitterness and see what's the proper way for healing that bitterness. Not always does it show that this prayer is really a deeper prayer. So a person could feel like he's in love with God, but really he's in love with an idea about what he thinks God is, and that's not God. And if he would know God, he wouldn't love it. And so he thinks he's in love. He found his God, but it might just be an idea. The real God might be extremely different. And the one that we're supposed to love, the one that it gives us life to love, is the real one. If we love him, immediately we're charging. Immediately we receive more life, because we're attaching ourselves to the source of life. If we love ideas, sometimes those ideas oppose the nature of our soul, and then our soul has less because of that love. And so sometimes a person could think he's praying out of love, but really It's not the right love. Or it could be something happened in the physical world that he loves. And so he's confused about what he really loves. As soon as that circumstance changes, suddenly his love for God is gone. So was it really love for God? And so all these conditions means that it's coming from a love that's not God. It's a love for something that's transitional, something that can be there one day and be gone the other day. That's not God. אמנם כשהוא באהבת השם מחמזה נפל אצלו בישה ורוצה לפרס השם יזברך לנצח עשה יצהר בשבילו אז הוא טוב. כי אדם לנקרא עבד השם יזברך כי אם בתחילו רחימו. So here's a lot of points, so we'll go a little slower. It says like this, כשהוא באהבת השם יזברך מחמזה נפל אצלו בישה ורוצה לפרס השם יזברך לנצח עשה יצהר. That's good. Azutov. Meaning that, how do you know it's really a love for something real? Is that with that love comes a stepping back. If it's love, I'm running straight in, I want all of it, it's not God. God is too big to run all in. When you see God, you step back. Love him, yes, but very hot. And so it's not something that we can feel at ease with easily. It took the prophets many attempts until they learned to be at ease with getting close to this force. This force is giving us life. It's giving us life through a process that's biological, and the spirit, the consciousness, can travel within the nervous system to closer and closer to this source. But the more it's there, the more it has control over what happens in the nervous system, but also the more it's dangerous if it's not programming properly, if it's not with the right intent. And so going closer to God in the intellectual sense of knowing, going closer to God in the emotional sense of feeling and being overtaken by love, this means that spiritually we're moving somewhere. There's a biological location of where the spirit is gaining access to. And then things are different. The way that the body behaves is different. The way that the soul understands is different. Because it's all based on how it's sitting within the organism. Just like in the mind of a child, things are different. So in the mind of an adult that has actually matured spiritually, things are different. And so when he gets into that place, he is suddenly ashamed. It doesn't matter how perfect he is. He is ashamed by the fact that something that can be exposed to such abuse, to such lowness, to such disrespect, is really something that even if we would dignify it all the time, our entire existence, it wouldn't even be a beginning of what it deserves. So there's a tremendous shame. Even if we know that humanity is wrong, we're playing along. We're part of humanity. We're part of the problem. Humanity doesn't have dignity for its own soul. And we, no matter how much dignity we have for our own soul, we're not even close. We didn't even begin in order to create forgiveness for what's happening. And so therefore there's shame. When we become aware of his greatness and his perfection, there's shame of how foolish we've been, how we've looked at things, how we fell for the illusion. No matter how smart, no matter how much we kept on searching, it was never enough. It's never close to what it actually deserves. And so now when a person knows that, he wants to give pride to the one who made all be the way that it is. Now he wants to change sides. He wants to make up for the damage that he did. If till now he disrespected, now he wants to dignify, he wants to praise, he wants to give glory. This is the result of him realizing that there's a greater power. How can you give force? How can you give pride to the force that made us? And so he created two worlds. He created the physical world, where our actions are and we get to interact with each other. And he created the internal world, the world of thought, where all the planning happens and all the decision making happens and all the spirits are active and all the angels are carrying the messages and creating this amazing world that we're experiencing without space and without time, somewhere else. We're remembering, we're projecting, we're coming to conclusions about what might be and what should be, and part of those conclusions actually come out into the physical world as reality. And so this process between the spiritual world, the world of thought, and the physical world, the world of action, the world of matter, has an intermediary. And that intermediary is the world of emotion, feelings. The world of thought is going to organize reality in a certain way, and what's going to react to that organization is the world of emotion. And then the world of emotion is going to decide what needs to happen in the world of action or in the world of speech. So between the world of thought and the world of action is the world of emotion, the world of speech. That's the human expression. That's the one that's uniting the two worlds. And so he's saying over here, what is the service that the spiritual world needs from the human being? He needs the service of love and awe, the service of emotion. Because this is the only way that he can come into the physical world and do anything. The only way the spiritual is going to interact with the physical is through the emotional. So what does he need from us? He needs our emotions. He needs our love, he needs our fear to align with the spiritual interests. If that will happen, then there's communication between the spiritual and the physical. If our love and our fear is based only on the physical, then there's no communication with the spiritual. Then everything in the physical is happening around the physical, and then it's disconnected. Then it's like a widow that has no husband. Because the spiritual is no longer gaining access into the physical. Because the emotions are not open to the spiritual in order to receive their guidance. And so therefore, what is the work that the spiritual is requesting of us? That we should feel the spiritual, that we should feel the soul, that we should understand what's going on in our hearts. This is the service that it needs in order to help the world. וירא שטיפול לו וירא ולא משהו מור עצמו לירא כי זה לא סמיים נקפם אבל הירא מיתסיק שטיפול לו לבחר לרעודו אם אחמס הפחד אין יודע היכן הוא והמויכן יזדחכו ויורדן דמוס מעליהן. It says there's different ways of experiencing an emotion. There's the female side of the emotion and there's the male side of the emotion. When we're experiencing the female side of the emotion, then we are the ones that are driving the emotion. We're trying to feel awe. So we're saying words that are inspiring awe. We're thinking thoughts that are inspiring awe. And then we are sort of in the driver's seat of the awe. So then it's the recipient that's driving the interaction. Then there's an awe that comes from above, where the male is giving the awe, and there's there's nothing in the female that's requesting that specifically. It's just open to the male, and this is what the male is giving. And so that awe is the male level of awe. That awe, it comes like from somewhere else. And then the person doesn't know where he is. He doesn't know, how did he get to that place? What's going on? That's the awe? Yeah. And so, when that happens, the intelligence gets purified on its own, because it means that there's been contact with a higher level of intelligence, with a higher truth. So when that happens, the intelligence within the human soul gets purified, and then there's tears coming out of the eyes on their own. There's no explanation for these tears. It's something that's from the soul. That the soul has like a coming home type of feeling, where something fell into place. By realizing that it's attached to something bigger, it's in tremendous awe. It feels lost. But that lost, as relative to the world that we've created for ourselves, the world that we're creating with our minds over and over again, lost from that world is being home in something bigger, in something more real. And so therefore there's tears. When that doesn't happen that way, so a person could think he loves the Creator, but the circumstances of life will constantly change, and then that will be tested. But when the love is sincere, then there's tremendous awe, because then it starts hitting reality. And reality is infinite weight. There's no limit to how real reality is. So once something becomes real, if a love for the Creator is real, then we start becoming real. And when we become real, there's a lot of fear about what is really happening here. We start understanding what's really going on. And that's a process that makes us much bigger. But at the same time, it exposes us to how big is this process that's happening here. And how small do we think we are? It's no match. Even if we just compare what we think we are to the sufferings that the world has been through in the last few decades or few hundred years, what we think we are doesn't justify. It would make no sense to pay this price to be us. And so there's something else that is much greater than that. And to digest that requires a process where the soul opens up to truth. And that awakening, that opening up, has its symptoms. So if someone simply says, I love the Creator, He's so nice, it's easy to love, that's not the Creator. The Creator is not like that. The Creator is awesome. The Creator is tremendous. The Creator, if someone is trying to approach, then they're going to look at life in a different way. Things are going to become a lot more serious. It's not just going to be a game anymore. It's not just going to be about who has a good joke or a good distraction. The Creator is in the house, and He is massive, and He has some very specific appetites for this place. He has a vision. And so if we're not going to try to direct ourselves towards that vision, we're certainly not going to make it. Certainly not going to somehow know how to manifest ourselves exactly without a direct effort. If we make a direct effort, then it depends how far we can go based on our starting point and based on His desire for us, His excitement towards our success. And this we can feel inside of us. His excitement, when it's expressed, is inside of our own bodies. It's been a very unexciting few thousand years. He hasn't been excited much. there was a different type of excitement, a negative type of excitement, which is also a very strong motivator, but not a healthy kind. That belongs to the polar opposite of the Creator, the force that's constantly taking life. And so that force has had spiritual advantages over the last couple of thousand years because of our process. And so the emotional response that we get from thinking about the Creator will guide us towards our direction becoming real. The more it's going to become serious, the more it's going to become intense, the more it means it's real. If it's just feel good and it's nice and it's easy, it's not real. Real doesn't work that way. Real is real, just like in the body, real. The Creator is more serious than a heart attack. He's serious. He's for real. He invested everything that it took to make this. That's very real. That's a very strong commitment. He takes it seriously. So loving Him is a very deep interaction. It's a very real affair. It's not something we could do as a hobby. If we can do it sometimes, then it's not Him we're loving, because any glimpse of Him, and it doesn't leave us. It's become today an intellectual idea about God. Is there a God? Isn't there a God? Where is the God? How is the God? But this is before the intellect. This is just the reality of existence. That's what we're interacting with. There's nothing here to slice or dice. There's existence, and that already indicates something very, very big is going on over here. Nothing to deny, nowhere to run. Because it's happening. And so if we love it, we're going to care about it. And caring about this in the condition it's in is quite scary. It requires some type of an intelligence that explains to us why is it in this condition. People today are afraid to love it. They don't want to go down with it. But how are they going to save themselves? By not loving it, it doesn't save us from going down with it. It's what we have. It's what we are. It's what is. And we must love it. We'll have to change it and do with it whatever necessary so that we love it, because we must love it. Loving it's not an option. More important than having money is loving it. Whoever doesn't love it is its enemy, and he is ruining it for everyone. And we all don't love it enough. And we've all played parts in not helping others love it enough. Loving it is a group effort. Loving it is not something we can do on our own, because if we get frustrated, we stop loving it. So it says, Zeh Ashar L'Shem, this is the doorway. Yira hu Ashar Lahava. The awe is the doorway to the love. No awe, no love, because it's not there. That's not the door. How can he have love for something if he hasn't realized what that something is? Because if he had realized what that something is, there would certainly be some trepidation. Mishu kanal ein afilu eved im koshken she'en madrag yesh tipul olav yira ve'en eved aved erur lehidi klal she'en eved Hashem yisborach rak mitzanashim olamadu. So a person who doesn't have that awe, it must be that everything that he's doing is just because he's copying, just because that's the way he's been trained, and so this is his habit. He's doing it out of habit. But there's no real attachment to something spiritual. There's no one to cling in there because there's no one. This is not a real story. This is the action that looks like real, but the soul is gone. No soul, no attachment to anything true. It's a story that took the soul hostage, and the soul is not involved any longer. Part of his story, part of the story that's carrying him, is that he is a big servant of the Creator. He loves the Creator. The Creator is his best friend. As soon as he leaves the world, the Creator will be there waiting for him and hug him and kiss him. And he is the favorite son of the Creator. But no awe. No true realization what we're up against. No realization of where the problem lies. No compassion for the suffering of humanity. No realization of the depth of the ignorance that's plaguing our species. And so he's not for real, he's not there. He has a story. The story is taking him for a ride. And then, within that story, he's making himself very comfortable. He's upgrading the story as needed in order to make it nice and cozy. So a person like that, he needs to start searching, because the truth is awesome, but only to those who have found it and know how to cling to it. Those who offend it because they don't know it, to them the truth is awful. And so we have to look for the truth to the extent that the truth motivates us, wakes us up, intimidates us. We have to be concerned about the truth. We have to be concerned of how does our manifestation of a human being compare to the real, original intent. Are we closer than those around us that we're constantly trying to outdo, or maybe our outdoing has caused us to be further away? And so this is concerning. This is something that is way too real to be neglected. And to the extent that we take it seriously, to that extent, we gain access to the spiritual worlds. If we don't take it seriously, we have no access. This is what happens to most people today. They don't take it seriously enough to even have any access. So they have no spiritual control over what's taking place in their life. Their life is playing out based on preset ideas, ingrained very early on, and then everything is just on replay. They believe the same ideals. They vote for the same parties. They have the same beliefs, the same culture, the same teams that they have to watch. That's just a continuance of something that's not human, something that's human-made. That human is man-made. There is no divine-made human there that's giving spiritual insight that can guide the organism. We'll do one more. Oy samach. התפילה שהוא בשמחה גדולה, בוודאי יוסר מקובלס לפניו יזברך שמו, יוסר מהתפילה בעצמוס בבכייה. A happy prayer is definitely more accepted than a sad prayer. למשל הזה, כשעוני שואל למבקש שמסחן לפני המלך בבכייה גדולה, אף על פי כן אין נסון לאל דבר מועט. So the king has his ways, how he interacts with the population, and the kings would care about the population. They would understand that the population is sort of like their body. The people are working for them, and when people had problems, it was the king's problem. The king would be involved. But if one comes and is very poor and he cries before the king is going to give accordingly. He'll give him what it requires for him to live for a week, for a month, for a year. And for that poor person to live for a year, that's nothing for the king. And so the king is going to give according to the one who is asking. אבל כשהשר מסעד לפני המלך, שבח המלך בשמחה, מתוך זה מבקש גם בקשוסוי, אז נוסן למלך בקושי מריבה מאוד כמו שנוסן לסורס. If the minister comes and he's excited, he's reporting to the king different improvements that he's made in his kingdom, and as he's praising the king and he's creating happiness, he asks for whatever it is that he needs. Obviously, when he will get with an entirely different measure than the one that comes and asks through crying and begging. And so in the spiritual world, when the soul comes up, who is the soul? It's all the same soul. So who is she? Well, that depends. What does she believe she is? How is she dressed up now? And so the same soul could be the poor one showing up in front of the king, and the king will interact with her like the poor one. The same soul could be the minister that's interacting with the king from a place of happiness, and then the king interacts accordingly, because the king doesn't change. The king is the same for all of us at all times. And yet no one has seen the same face of the king twice. Each one of us is seeing a different face of the king, and each moment, each one of us is seeing a different face of the king. The king never dresses up the same. And how does he dress up? According to how we dress him up. How do we dress him up? Because we take the other party we take the other side. Whichever spouse we choose, he's the other one. Whichever side of a situation we choose, he's the other side. We're choosing a side because we think we're interacting with that. Okay, he goes with it. If I'm the poor one coming in front of the king and I'm crying, hey, king, look at what they did to me. Okay, that's what you are. That's what you get. I'm the minister, come to the king. Hey, look at what's going on. It's time to celebrate. Okay, then, let's celebrate. The king will go with everyone according to how they dress him up, because the king doesn't change. Okay.